your work and even leadership in this area?
Good question, Melissa, thank you.
Yeah, well, I can only give my
I was gonna
opinion.
ask that too.
I can't speak for the board, which will be meeting in a few weeks, actually.
Mm-hmm.
It's already August. I think one of the things is conscience rights. I know the National Catholic Bioethics Center, I just sent a public comment on that on Monday. But conscience rights, and where it becomes really important is if your providers are not empowered to be your whistleblower, and conscience rights provides that for someone to say, I'm not comfortable with this. And we have examples of, for example, in the Catholic Medical Association, I sit on their board, and we polled members on that. And a physician even being told, if you want to work in palliative care, you better be willing, in a state that engages in a physician-assisted suicide, to participate in that in some way. And so if you don't have a physician who can say, my conscience says this is not in your best interest, you might be that little coerced patient who's not quite sure, and you've got a physician who's being told patient autonomy reigns, and you must be willing to do X, Y, or Z. So conscience, I think, is where if people are not able to, providers, operate in a patient's best interest, and that doesn't mean you're going to impose procedures that they don't want, you can't do that, or make decisions in denying treatment, but it does mean that you might have to transfer care, but you have to be able to have honest conversations with patients. So I think for persons with disabilities, this is going to be huge, because that voluntary stopping of eating and drinking that I talked about, well, think about the coercion that can move a person in that direction. So providers of conscience. And the other real danger, if we're not there speaking to the rights of providers to say no to certain things, the only people entering the healing professions will be those who are willing to attack human life or mutilate. Think about that. And there have been ethicists who have said that they've published in professional journals that you better leave your religious beliefs, if it's legal, you better be willing to do it. And I say leave it with your lab coat, when you put on your lab coat or put on your scrubs. That's the mentality. So I think that's really important. And the other thing that I mentioned that is very controversial, because it's tied to being labeled as discriminatory. But if we don't start advocating for young people who have gender dysphoria, who if we just leave them alone, are not going to be mutilated by stopping puberty, that we're creating a disability. We're actually, you think about that, we're impacting their sterility, fertility, I should say. So it's not something, it's more perhaps peripheral to what we see as our mission, but you're actually creating a disability. You're creating, attacking fertility of people. So but I think the big thing is conscience, because if people can be so easily coerced, and if we haven't allowed providers to be whistleblowers, and again, there's been some good public policy being proposed out of the current administration in terms of health and human services. One that's just supposed to go into effect in July, that now, because the Health and Human Services is being sued on their conscience protections that they've just put in place, and so they didn't implement them in July, they're going to wait until November. San Francisco has sued the federal government for trying to protect our consciences. And so I think that's, for me anyway, and then of course I'm a nurse, I'm a provider, so I see that as, no one ever taught me how to kill a patient when I went to Children's Hospital in Boston. And to think that there's such coercion of nurses to participate in abortion, and that's eugenic. So I think conscience is.
That's a very important
You
point.
must
And
have
I think,
some thoughts.
well, I think we're gonna continue the work in fighting assisted suicide, certainly. 'Cause keeps rearing its ugly head in every state, or in so many states, so we'll continue that. And just recently, we mentioned it earlier, you did, when the bills were signed in New York and in Virginia for the late-term abortion bills. I know that Michael Adamus had, and some others had suggested maybe we should do a statement, and there was a draft of one to
Lisa, I think.
yeah,
yes,
to look at the in terms of, so often the reasoning is disability, so how discriminatory that is
Mhm.
too, just in terms, so I think that'll be another issue that we'll probably speak to, or at least with a statement, is just the
Yes.
concern raised about, again, people making all these judgments and all these policies and these laws and decisions based on, I wouldn't wanna live that way.
Yeah, and when you think there are now 7 jurisdictions in the district, and actually, we have either gone to or provided public comment to 8 jurisdictions, and the only one that we were not successful, and that means NCPD, it was District of Columbia where we're sitting right now, but I
We worked
understand,
so hard.
but there hasn't been one death by assisted suicide in DC that I'm aware of.
Not sure, I
Yeah.
haven't looked at that.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
understand they were trying to find a provider who will do it.
And I think with that, we will maybe be raising some of the statistics you talked about earlier in terms of Oregon, but some of the others, because people always, or the people in favor of it wanna say, oh, you talk about slippery slopes, that's not, that's not
Oh.
true, but I think we need to hold up and show more examples of that where things really are happening.
Good
And
point.
there's we do work too with the Euthanasia Prevention Society, which has started in Canada. There's a a United States version now too. They got a great video, the euthanasia deception. They have another one now too, but that one it just sticks in my mind, where a father has a daughter with a disability, and you see them interacting in their living room, and she's not unlike many people that we've known and who we want to have be part of our parish communities and involved. And on this video, it just struck me so strongly, where the visual that you're looking at is a dark sky, and this father says, and he's in Belgium, it's like this overcast, just laying over us. And he said, I had an example of people coming up to me when I'm on the street with my daughter,
Why don't
saying,
you?
why haven't you euthanized her yet? And it's very powerful, and I think that's what we're trying to fight is, and all of us in the dioceses and in the parishes, when you're getting to know people and you care about them as people and as friends, and you know them as somebody's daughter or grandchild, then it's easier to appreciate their humanity and be willing to fight some of these policies and programs that are trying to say, you're not worthy of, as you said earlier, worthy of life. You're not worthy of having a life, or you're not worth the money that we have to expend to keep you alive.
Or look what you're doing to your family. And I don't know of any person with a disability that family hasn't felt blessed.
Right?
Family hasn't felt blessed.
Uh,
But
regarding conscience, Maggie from Atlanta said, in Atlanta we have a declaration of life available for individuals who might be murdered and do not want the convicted individual given a death penalty sentence. This came about following the murder of Father Rene Robert.
Right. I love that. And yeah, that's true, because he was killed in Georgia, even though he was from Florida. And that was a beautiful thing that he happened to have signed that statement.
Oh, he had? I didn't realize that.
Years
I did
before
not
he was
know that.
murdered.
Uh-huh.
And they found it in
Huh.
his file
I
in the
did not know
diocese,
this,
and
yeah.
then the diocese went to bat
Yes.
for, they actually
death penalty.
testified at the trial that they did not want the death penalty for the man who they knew had killed, who admitted to killing
Did not
him.
know that.
Yeah, it's a beautiful story. Thank you, Maggie, for
Yeah.
bringing that up, because that certainly is a life issue too. And the National Catholic Mobilizing Network is our neighbor right here in this building, and we actually did an evening earlier. It must have been in January, February, because it was cold out.
March for Life.
Oh, yeah, okay, it was that's right, it was the night it was the night of the vigil mass for the March for Life the next day, so it was January. Where there's been a video done on his life, on the
Did
life
not
of
know
Father
that,
Rene.
yeah.
It's beautiful, and it tells the story. It's even got some footage of him, and of course he was a person that we knew well as a Franciscan friar, and then as a priest of the Diocese of St. Augustine, because he worked with the deaf community and had worked at the Florida School for the Deaf and Blind, and was very beloved by those communities. So he was really one of our points of contact for disability ministry in that diocese for decades. And
Talk about being consistent about being
Yeah.
pro-life.
exactly, yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think that's an important thing for us, and we had encouraged the Catholic Mobilizing Network to have those available, even to remind people that we can
Mhm.
be signing those, because it's an important witness, as you said.
Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't know that story. That's.
Yeah.
But you know, the other thing that we've done together is on the pastoral guidelines too. That's
The Sacramental Guidelines?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
that's we didn't. We're attempting to promulgate.
Right.
We didn't. I didn't have anything to do with writing them, but